Let's get right to it today. This seltzer water that I'm holding and drinking right here, Polar 100% natural seltzer water made with natural flavors, family made since 1882, which is what you like to see. Delicious. Not a sponsor. I'm just trying to get them to be. I actually had never heard of it. I was in Walgreens, CVS, one of the two. I think it was Walgreens. It might have been CVS. CVS is kind of like a poor man's Walgreens. And was picking out sparkling water and stumbled upon this because I just hadn't heard of it before. It was on sale. And lime is my favorite flavor for the sparkling water beverages. And it is delicious. So the people at Polar, if you're listening, if you're watching, sponsor the program because I just gave you 46, 47, 48 seconds of free airtime. I plugged your seltzer water for that long. There it is again. Here's the can. I'm showing it on the video version right now. Polar, 100% natural seltzer, made with natural flavors, family made since 1882. Didn't get anything from that. I paid them. I bought the 12-pack. This is very good. But you know who is a sponsor? Is our friends at Il Taco Foods. Il Taco Foods has been feeding the hungry people of Chicago since 1927. Their most popular item, the pizza puff, became a Chicago staple almost as soon as it hit the very first hot dog stand in the city. For those that don't know, a pizza puff is premium mozzarella, crumbled Italian sausage, and a signature home-style sauce wrapped in a pillowy yet crispy crust. And that's just the original. They have 14 different flavors. You can learn more about the flavors and where to buy them from their website, www.iltaco.com. Through 4 generations of hard work and a passion for good food, their family-run business now distributes Chicago's Pizza Puff in 38 states across the U.S. Check out the website to find out where you can get the good stuff. Again, that's iltaco.com. Now, our guest today is Dan LaMorte. Dan is a stand-up comedian out in New York, touring again pretty soon. You can get his tour dates at Dan LaMorte, DanLaMorte.com/tour. And follow him again on Twitter and Instagram at Dan LaMorte. But the interesting thing about Dan's story, I'd say the unique thing about it, because all our comedian guests are interesting, all our guests in general are interesting, but the one thing you'll get from Dan you're not going to get anywhere else is he lost 170 pounds, which is just an insane amount of weight to lose in a relatively short period of time, about a year. I lost roughly 20 pounds, I think, between December and now, maybe 15, 12, 8, I don't know what it was. Somewhere between 7 and 20 pounds in total. And I thought, I was proud of myself. And you hear Dan's story of losing 170 pounds and it just takes the wind out of your sails. Because how the hell, the first question you ask is, how the hell would you do that? And you'll hear from our conversation that Dan's determination and focus in accomplishing that goal translates to all different parts of life. I mean, this is how he became successful, a national headliner at a young age. And that's how he's going to continue, I think, pushing his career forward, as he has a great outlook for just 25 years old and a great perspective moving forward in comedy, in fitness, and self-improvement. We cover all this. We talk about kind of things evolving in comedy, things about self-improvement and trying to find that focus and that mental space to accomplish your goal, like losing 170 pounds. And then, again, how that translates to other walks of life. So I think you'll really enjoy our conversation. Dan's a really funny guy, a really great guy. And, again, his focus is just something that's very impressive. So here he is, Dan LaMorte.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Kaiser.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
I went out to eat for the sake of this next joke. Joke.
Order the double cheese and sausage.
Joe Kaiser, ladies and gentlemen.
It's obviously super interesting and inspiring to see someone that, how much weight did you lose in total?
I was 181 pounds today, so that's 354 is my heaviest, 170 something.
Holy shit, that's crazy. Lighter than me.
There are some days where I dip into the 170s, but I usually gain it back because how much I run. I got to drink so much fluids that it's easy for me to lose and gain like 10 pounds in a day.
Right. How much do you run?
Uh, so today, I mean, like about 60 plus miles a week, you know?
Oh shit.
I
Nice.
mean, I definitely go for a lot of hard trails too. Like today was in the mountains, so it's a lot of elevation. Yesterday was in the mountains, get up early. Uh, so I'm what they call like I do ultra races now. This is my new thing, like races that are just very far distances, further than marathons. So I don't know. You know, when comedy goes away, I guess this is what
You got to
happens.
find something. Yeah. You got to find something new. I used to hate running, and I took it up like casually a few years ago, and then since the pandemic, I run at least every other day.
Yeah.
Um, because once you start getting in a rhythm of it, I think it seems like it's so hard when you're out of shape or you don't do it. But once you get in a rhythm, it just becomes easy. Like
Yeah, it's a
running
very
a few
interesting
miles.
thing. Even like the more you do it, like I was really in a lot of pain 30, 40-mile weeks. And then like eventually your body just gets used to beating it, I guess. Your body could just take the beating a bit better.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like a 5K like 5 years ago to me would be annoying, and now I run at least a 5K almost every day. So it's like it's just something you get used to. Did you? I saw a tweet from you a couple days ago that I did not realize was you used to play college baseball.
I was a college baseball player, yeah, for one game.
Where did you go to school?
I went to a school called Felician University in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Okay.
I had about coming out of high school, I had about 7 scholarship offers, but I was arrested for selling drugs my junior or senior year. So a few of those offers just weren't plausible, and I wanted to stay in state. So went to this little Division II school, and then opening day, I blew out my arm as a true freshman. So I was the first pitcher to come in out of the bullpen, and I blew out my arm. I think in my second or third inning.
So when that happened, were you like, what kind of trajectory were you on? Were you interested in comedy at the time, or like, how did you end up? What was your path?
It's funny, you know, I've unfortunately through the years, whether it be couple car accidents or drug use or blackouts, my memory is a bit hazy, but I do remember that like when my friends would be warming up for big games and they'd be listening to music or whatnot, I'd be listening to comedy like in the outfield. I'd have my headphones on, listening to stand up before games. I remember being very interested in the roasts, and then through the roasts as a kid is how I found Greg Giraldo, and that was like the first stand up I had really gotten into. I was Midlife Vices and Good Day to Cross the River were his album and his special, which I was a very big fan of both. And I was always the class clown for sure. Like I wasn't really a popular kid, but I definitely knew how to get laughs. And it just seemed when you're a college athlete, even at the Division II level, that's every day, you know, multiple hours a day, sometimes 2 a day workouts. So I was like, what else? What other career really requires someone to dive completely in? And the plight of a stand-up is pretty intimidating. So I was like, why not go all in on this? Very shortly after I dropped out of college, and so you have it, became a stand-up.
Sure. Yeah, I've noticed like the determination between writing jokes and performing and the grind of stand up is very similar to like working out in a way. Like I think
Very
when you
much
like
so, which
yeah.
weirdly it contributes to gaining weight. It's like working out, but it's really not great for your health.
Right. Yeah. No, it's not at all. But like something about the the focus on writing jokes and then trying to perfect your stage persona is very similar to like trying to get in shape. Like I feel like there's a correlation there of like the
Yeah, and then
determined.
even in New York, just the things you have to do to kind of get on stage does feel like kind of a workout. Like it wasn't rare for me when I was 19, I was waking up pretty early, you know, 5, 6 in the morning, driving to Staten Island. They had the Staten Island ferry goes from Staten Island to the city, and it's free. And there was a parking lot there that was $7. I became friends with the guys. They let me leave my car in there for like 2, 3 days. I would take the ferry into the city. I would sell tickets in Times Square for the New York Comedy Club from like 8 to 6, 8 to 6:30. Then I'd go to the club. I'd get one spot for that, and then I'd go to a bar called the Village Lantern, and I'd bark there at night, just stand in front of the club, try to get people in. And then I'd go to my dad's deli where he had a storage room above the deli, and I'd sleep on a washing and drying machine. And then I'd just do it the next day until I smelt too bad. Then I'd go home, recuperate. And that was kind of, and that kind of felt like working out to me. Sure, in that time frame, I was getting much fatter, but it was a
Sure.
different kind of workout. You know, I felt at home because I was like, well, this is kind of like sports. This is
Yeah.
all in. You know, I feel like I'm back in the grind again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you can get really good at a sport, that same kind of that work ethic translates to something like that, and then can translate to trying to lose weight eventually. I mean, like it's the same level of commitment of going all in to really to make it
Yeah,
work.
and but truthfully though, I used to always compare the two, and then that actually led me probably into some negative spaces because like in sports, if you have the statistics, the rewards are there. There's no way around it. If you're playing well, you're in the lineup. That is the way it goes. Comedy wasn't always like that. You know, over time I kind
Yeah.
of realized that sometimes the people who were putting in the work and deserved the shots weren't getting it, and that kind of threw me off because I was so used to this. You do this, you put in the work, this is what happens, and I was like, all right, this isn't comedy, and it took me some time to adjust that to be like, there is no rhyme or reason in this specific business.
Right. There's no like algorithm to success. There's no like exact path that you have to follow to like make it work. That's
No,
hard
and
to
even
get
when
your
you
head around.
do find yourself on the path to success, you could kind of like shoots and ladders, just find yourself going back down a few levels, you know?
Right.
It's not rare to step on something and go back down in comedy, and you get a little something, you lose a little something.
Right. Yeah. Like it is a meritocracy in the terms of like if you're funny, you keep putting in the work, you'll probably make it. But every step of the way, you're trying to get somebody's permission to at a club or a gatekeeper like Netflix or like. There's always a gatekeeper at every step of the way that's
Yeah.
going to help you
Now
move
in New
along.
York, it's the park rangers, you know.
Yeah. So there's always somebody to there's always somebody to move you along. But so did you start doing stand up right after you dropped out of school? What was that like?
So I left the school I was at, Felician University, went to, there was a junior college like 40 minutes from my house that had the number one junior college baseball team in the country at that point. So there was still an idea for me to play. And while that summer transitioning from a 4-year school to the junior college is when I started doing stand up, like open mics. And I kept doing stand up into the second semester of my second year. So my first year of junior college, second year of college. I remember I was doing it because I was still taking a public speaking class at that community college, and I was already a stand up, and I was like, I get why people take steroids. Like I kind of understood it.
Yeah.
I was like, you just felt like I still actually stay in touch with that professor. He was like, you were such a good student. I was like, I was a public speaker already. That is
Right.
why.
Right. Yeah.
And then I remember we had like the first team practice, and the 4-year school I was at, which was like a bigger deal, was much more lax than this junior college. They were fucking grinding it out. The coach wanted us to run 8 miles, I think, something like that, the first practice. And I had already started to gain some weight. I wasn't in the same mentality because my arm wasn't feeling great. And I think maybe like 2 miles in, I quit. I was like, I'm done with baseball, which was a very interesting moment for me because like I had played since I was, 4 years old, maybe. It was my entire life. And I just had this weird thing come over me where I was like, this is it. You're done with this. And I went up to him and I said, that's it. And then I dropped out probably a few weeks later.
I totally understand that personality though, because like I played baseball and basketball into high school, and there's a certain point where I can't fathom it now, where it's like I'm not all in anymore, so I don't want to keep doing it. If I'm not whatever hobby I'm doing, if I'm not going all in, like I'm gonna
Exactly.
lose
And when it
interest.
starts to feel like work, it kind of became a bit different.
Exactly.
But that was always my mentality. When it starts to feel like work, bail. And now as an adult, I'm kind of like, well, actually, you need to put in work. It's
Sure.
funny that my mentality is just always fun. I mean, I talk as if I'm an old person. I'm fucking 25 years old. What the hell do I know?
Sure. But no, I totally get that feeling of it. Like it just it's kind of almost an obsessive personality. Like I think from my perspective of like I won't pick up a hobby if I'm not going all in. Like I don't golf or I don't like there are an array of things. I quit doing music at a certain point, like in high school, because I wasn't all in on it. It just
Yeah.
loses interest. And that's
And so
why,
I
like,
call it living in the extreme. That's how
yes,
I always describe it. Like when I was at my fattest versus now when I'm fucking, trying to be an ultra runner and shit. Like those are just, to me, it's all the same. It's all an extreme. I'm just choosing to live at different ends of it.
yeah.
It's the
So
addicts mentality. Addicts have a way of being addicts in everything they do.
right, yeah, whatever they gravitate toward. So you're just then gaining weight because what, you're just not paying attention to it, just like the lifestyle.
That and then depression. There was a period of time where what I attribute it to is I had success quickly. I would say, I wasn't necessarily on any big TV shows, this or that, but within 2 years, I had auditioned and passed at the Comedy Cellar. I wasn't the youngest because Pete Davidson had gotten in at the same age or a year younger, but I was the quickest to ever do it. I've been doing stand up for 2 years. And after about a year there, they stopped using me completely. And that really fucked with me because even though I was getting heavier along the way, my happiness in life was really just tied to comedy. Comedy was going well, so I didn't care how I looked. I was doing great on, career-wise was going fine. That shit meant nothing. And then once the happiness got pulled from comedy, now it's like, oh, you're actually not happy with yourself. Now that comedy's not going good, you feel like shit because what's
Mhm.
underneath the comic isn't something you're happy with. And there was a whole like lineup of things that I would say added up to like how I got that. I was in a few car accidents and I used that as excuses not to really work out anymore. So when they ran the blood work on one of the accidents, that's when they discovered my liver was kind of messed up, which made sense because I was in all this pain. And I went home, didn't do anything about it, took that information, could have used it to change, and I didn't. And then it got so bad that I thought my appendix burst, but it was actually just my liver was so fatty that it was kind of when the doctor pushed in, it was
Yeah.
pushing into my liver. And I was 354 pounds that day. And I was like, all right, this is it. I was laying in a hospital bed. I was like, this is the day it changes. This was it. And I would trips to Los Angeles to escape. So I got so tired of the New York comedy scene that I would just go to LA for like a month at a time, Airbnb a month-long lease and just stay there. I would do some hikes, work out in the gym, do a lot of sets. I fucking love doing comedy in LA. So many people shit on it. It's the best fucking time. I don't think I could live there full time, but I could always use it as an escape. It's a wonderful
Sure.
place to do stand up.
So backing up just a second to the Comedy Cellar. So did they drop you? Did they tell you why they dropped you? They just was it out of
No, but I mean, at this point, to me, it was like if I were to watch a set from then, or even if I was to find a set list from those days, I'd be ashamed at what I was doing. And as a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old, you think nothing of it because it's getting laughs. But everyone else there, they were still in their 30s, their 40s. You had guys who were 20-year vets. You can't get that bullshit past them. And I think some of them were like, this guy's not ready. And then there was one night where the booker, Esty, had actually watched a set of mine. And the comic before me crushed. And she happened to catch the worst set I'd ever had at the Cellar. I just couldn't buy a fucking laugh. And that was the set, of course, she was in the room for. And after that, I went from like, 8+ spots a week down to maybe 3. Then that got worked to 2 a week. And then you'd stay at that for a while. You'd stay at 2 a week for a month. And then it went down to 1 a week for a month and every other week. And then eventually it was phased out. And it
so
fucked me up for a while. But now I very
totally.
much, I'm fine with it at this point. I'm quite happy at how it all went down. I learned so much there. And it also really humbled me in a way that I think changed my life outside of comedy, which I really needed at that point because I had lost a lot of balance.
Right. Well, I was gonna say, well, first at 22, you don't really have that perspective of when a perceived failure happens, like of what positives can come out of that. But then also, do you think if that didn't happen, it would have not led to all the things that encouraged you eventually to lose weight?
Exactly. Like if I stay in that club and somehow find a way to keep getting sets, I don't know if things keep going, if I get a late night set, if I did it tonight, I don't know if I lose the weight when I did right now. No, I was cast in I hate acting. I'm not a big fan of it. I suck at it. I've bombed every acting audition I've ever been on. I've had some real awful ones. I remember one time I didn't prep for an acting audition at all because I hated it. And they made me read lines. They're like, you got to read your lines with this dude, RJ. I was like, cool. And then in walks this motherfucker who was Walter White Jr. in Breaking Bad. I was so nervous that I said my name is Big Tiny, reading for the role of Dan LaMorte. Like I read it backwards. It was awful. But these dudes in Jersey, like they had some money and funding. They cast me in this movie, and they wanted me to be fat. I was literally Artie Lang was supposed to do the movie, backed out on it, and then they casted me. I was 23 at the time when they cast me. So I'm a 23-year-old being told to play Artie Lang, who was not really looking too good at the point.
Right.
And I was starting to lose. I was expressing that I wanted to lose weight. They're like, no, you got to stay heavy. And then
Oh
I
god.
actually made the decision to bail from the movie. I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. And that was a really big moment for me because I'd always said yes to everything. I felt bad ever canceling anything. And then I told those guys, hey, I don't want to do this. I really want to make some changes. I ended up never making a movie, which I did feel bad about. But that to me was like a really pivotal moment where I put my foot down. I was like, fuck this. This business is so shitty. You're either too fat or not fat enough.
Yeah, it's super liberating to say no to something. I was
Oh,
like
it's my
that.
favorite.
Yeah. Like I said yes to everything when I was in college, and then but saying no to like a job is exhilarating. It's
Yeah,
like I
saying no
can
to
say no.
shows became really great because you would find yourself, there'd be so many car rides home. You'd be like, how do I keep saying yes to gigs like this? How many
Right.
firehouses do I want to get heckled in? How many-
Yeah. Right. Well, especially when you're young, you think every show is gonna like build to the next big thing, but eventually just you can say no to a few
Yeah,
things
that's
here or
I
there.
would tell myself, each set matters, but then I'd be on my way home from, Westchester, New York after performing next to a pool in a backyard
Yeah.
after eating shit that one guy's like, I'm going to kick you in the pool. And I'm like, what is this contributing towards? When is this muscle going to flex?
Right,
What
right, right.
muscle that I just learned in Westchester? When is this going to fucking come out?
Right. So how did your perspective too as a comic change? So like as a 22-year-old, and you were saying that you would be ashamed of your performances then if you look back at them. When you're going through all this, did it influence the way you approach comedy, or even like how you worked at comedy?
Yeah, weirdly, I started doing a lot more crowd work, so much so that it kind of became a thing that not that I would say I was known for, but like if I'm up on stage, people are very much expecting me to do crowd work. There's some clubs that like to book me because they know I'll work the audience. And that was something I'd never done before. And it was this desire to just be a little more in the moment and not lose track. You could perfect these jokes and then you get up there and you're like, well, I would just have this feeling where I was like, I want to be a little more present. And that led to different writing. I mean, even it's still ever changing right now because doing stand up 175 pounds less, I kind of feel like I'm starting over again, especially with the pandemic. But I mean,
Sure.
I'm doing the other day, I mean, I'm a nationally touring headliner to an extent. The other day I was 28th on a rooftop mic in Brooklyn. I was
Yeah.
I don't look the same. People who used to know me don't recognize me anymore. I really feel like I'm just starting over again. And I love it. I love every aspect of it. It feels like I felt so pigeonholed into the type of comic I was. And that's the opposite thing of what comedy is. That's when you start to feel down in it. Comedy is growing. Comedy is changing. Like you grow in life, you could get better on stage. People
Right.
like to joke. They're like, oh, you're skinny now, you can't be funny anymore. I'm like, no, I'm going to be 2 times as funny because I just
Right.
went through so much more shit. Comedy is just processing the shit you've been through to make it a little funny.
Totally. I love that perspective because I used to think that there's always this like misconception that sadness kind of breeds humor, like it breeds a sense of humor, but I think it's not necessarily like turning sadness into creativity. It's more like a deficiency can create a sense of humor. So whether it's a deficiency of being sad, or like you use your example, if you were creating humor from your weight, like some kind of deficiency at early on in life especially can create a sense of humor because you're making up for something else, and that's kind of how
For
you create
sure.
jokes. And that's like, so that can change all the time. Like it changes with you. It grows with you. It doesn't have to be. I used to think if I went to therapy or took an antidepressant, like I would suddenly become less creative, and that's bullshit. It's like your sense of
Exactly.
humor comes from somewhere, some kind of deficiency, some kind of place that you want to grow.
For sure. Yeah. And there are times where I've fallen into that where it wasn't even that long ago where I tweeted, comedy, it was a joke, but I was like, comedy is one of the few professions where when you better yourself, it actually makes your career harder. And it was a
Yeah.
joke. I was just trying to make a joke. And a few comics got offended and came at me on Twitter being like, you're promoting the wrong stuff. And I ended up deleting the tweet, and I really took a lot of time to reflect on it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not ever going to post that again, because that isn't the right message. What I've worked so much on stage, what I try to teach younger comics when they ask me about like my style on there, because it's very conversational and in the moment, is like every joke is written from a feeling, whether it is happiness or sadness. And sometimes the silliest jokes I wrote on my worst days. So what I do when I'm on stage is when I tell that joke, I try to bring myself into the same mentality I had when I wrote that joke, whether it was elation. Say I wrote a joke when I was having a good day. When I tell that joke, I try to think of that good day, and it makes me so much more present in the joke that I felt my way connecting with the crowd in ways that I hadn't. And I was thinking about that when these comics were bringing that up, that I was promoting something bad. And I was like, they're right. I said the wrong shit. That's not what you should do. Comedy doesn't
Right.
need to be sadness. I do think comics tend to we can't deny the fact that mental illness is pretty prominent in comedy, but there's a large part of me that thinks that's because comics try to feel the empathy of others. I mean, when you feel others' empathy
sure.
and try to feel what everyone else is feeling, you sometimes take on their sadness.
I truly used to believe what you tweeted, though, like that if certain aspects of the way I thought about things got better, if conditions improved, then it would lose my sense of humor, my creativity or something. I always thought like I'm pulling creativity out of the darkest or the saddest moments all the time, but it's not, it doesn't have, like you just said, it comes from a range of emotions. A switch kind of flipped for me. I heard Conan O'Brien talking about this on Mark Maron's podcast years ago, where he said, like, I thought if I took antidepressants, I wouldn't be funny anymore. And he's like, that turned out that I was wrong. Like, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, like maybe like that's just within you. Like you have empathy, you can pull from different emotions.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you don't have to sit in the sadness. And there was so long, like, it's along the similar wavelength where I wouldn't lose weight. I knew I had to start losing weight, but I'd be like, it's easier to be a fat comic, and
Sure.
I was like, what are you going to do? Lose those jokes? And then I remember actually, typing out my set list at that time, the material I was working on the row, whether it was, 45 minutes or whatnot. And I was like, look, man, there's 3 fat jokes out of all these jokes. And I'm like, you're staying unhealthy for those 3 jokes. I was like, if anything, you could reword those when you lose the weight into I used to be fat. It's easy enough, and it sometimes it's just you put up these weird shields that aren't actually true because it blocks improvement. Especially
like if you have the experience now of having lost all that weight, that's such a unique thing that you can create material from that experience. Like that there's
for sure.
could be more than 3 jokes. Like you had 3 jokes about being fat. Like I'm sure you can grab way more stuff out of the experience of losing 100 whatever it was, 170 pounds.
For sure. I mean, I haven't written much on it. It's still something I'm actively trying to work on, but I love the challenge. There are sometimes I try to riff it on stage. If there's something new, I had a joke the other night I said on stage that was on the spot, and I was like, all right, I like that. And that came from something I thought about when I was running. And I won't lie, I haven't been producing as much material as I would have liked during this pandemic, but that's because my energy has gone elsewhere and to training and this and that.
Oh, hey, Naked Tane is here. Life coach, thought leader, lifelong learner. Reading is incredibly important to some people, not to me. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I read every single day or that I've ever read a word in any book or that I even know how to read. But I will tell you this. As a thought leader or an influencer, it's very important for you to choose the right books when taking pictures or videos of yourself and posting them on social media. Books that make you look smart, like the dictionary, or the encyclopedia, or books that make you look like you're a caring person, like a children's book, something from Dr. Seuss, or even this book that I've been reading lately, Penis Pokey. This is an interactive book that I believe children of all ages can read, and I haven't checked it out, but I'm about to. It makes me look smart. It makes me look caring. That's a funny one. Reading, very important to looking like a thought leader or an influencer. All right.
Do you think so? Since you were 22, if you were ashamed of stuff you're putting out then, and it's always cringy to see a joke you made like 3 or 4 years ago, but do you think your sense of humor has evolved maybe like in the last year or so when you've been going through all this?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's like I remember last year, if you asked me if I liked the second album I put out, I have 2 albums. My first one, really not a big fan of. The first time notoriously, the first time I ever did an hour was when I recorded my first album. I had never done that long of a set until I had to put out a CD. I think I was 2 years into comedy as well at that time. My second album, as much as a year ago, I would have told you I really was proud of. And even now when I hear it, I'm like, I'm past this. This just isn't me. And it's because when I look at clips of when I recorded that, I still don't look anywhere near that person. I look
Correct.
so different. I feel different. I don't really think the same, whether for the better or worse. I have more anxiety now as a skinny person than I did as a fat person. I've been trying to talk about that more on stage. It's hard to find the full realm of humor in it, but you pick up little tags here and there, and eventually you get to crack into a full joke.
Sure. Yeah. It is weird I mean, maybe older comics have this, but to look back at something when you start so young, to look back at something from when you're like 19, 20, 21 and kind of cringe, because anybody who at 25 or 30 looks back at themselves when they're early 20s or as a teenager, they're not the same person. Like even if you didn't lose weight, like you at 18 is not the person you are at 25. Like I cringe when I think about even outside of comedy, like things that I thought and felt when I was 18. It's
Yeah.
just like that's not the same person as I am today. But if you start young and you are successful, you have some of that documented. Like I think about all the kids on TikTok right now. Like that stuff, maybe 10 years from now, you're going to cringe when you see you dance to thousands of people. Or even in
Oh, for
comedy,
sure.
like Bo Burnham's talked about how he like cringes at the idea of his videos when he was 16, like how
I remember
immature they
those
were
in his
in his
bedroom
bedroom.
on the piano.
Yeah, and now he has
Boyo.
yeah, Boyo. Now you have multiple Netflix specials that have come from a place of more perspective and more thought, but that record of what you created at 16 is always out there, and we're probably the first generation that has a record of sharing opinions or sharing like a creative outlet online when we were still developing our brains, and it's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, it's like this weird thing where like I'm still so close removed from the recording of the first album, which is probably only 4 years ago, that I don't have much fondness looking back. But I'm sure when I'm 40 and I'll 15 years from now, and I'm like, oh, this is because like by no means is it the reaction is insane. Then that night I remember vividly. It was one of the best nights of my life, one of the best crowds I ever had. I'll probably look back and be like, sure, this material stinks, but it's like this little piece that exists of who you were in that moment. Which is
Yeah.
the interesting thing about a comedy album is what you're getting is that person in that moment. That night will always be captured. And that part of me, that part of that album is alluring to me. I'm not there yet. I mean, if it comes on, I skip the track. I can't sit there and put myself in that moment because it's too close to still being in my head. But I think years from now, I'll appreciate it. I'll be like, oh, man, I wish I didn't do that fucking joke, but I like this, I like hearing it again.
That's a good outlook, and I guess we don't know what it's going to be like in our 40s of
No,
like
it'll
a
probably
record.
be nowhere. It'll probably
Yeah.
be in the little USB chip that has the last album will be in a dirt pile of the wreckage of whatever the next 15 years bring.
Right. So what was your just got sidetracked slightly from the Comedy Cellar thing. When was that break then? So you went to LA for a bit. When did you think there was like a turning point in your whole path?
So the second trip to Los Angeles, I remember it was a break out of my comfort zone. If I could trace it all back to anything. So one of the biggest comedy festivals is the Big Sky Comedy Festival, which is in Montana. I mean, as far as United States comedy festivals go, it's one of the hardest to get into. It's really the industry's top notch. The shows are next level. I mean, it is one of the best festivals. And I wasn't losing weight at the time, but I had gotten into that. And I was 23 at the time. I had, at this point, I was basically realizing I was no longer in at the cellar. And I know it was around that time because my entry tape was a cellar tape. And one of the parts of the Big Sky Comedy Festival is they force you to hang out. When you get in there, you have to wake up at a certain time. You do activities with the other comics. You hang out with the industry. And I was very much reclusive at that point. I wasn't big on the hang. I don't know if it was because coming up as a teenager in New York, I kind of dealt with a lot of shit from some older comics who would say and do things to me that I didn't like, and it jaded me maybe. But Big Sky opened me up to where I was meeting all these other comics. I was actually becoming friends with them. I was drinking with them. It was stuff I'd never done before, and that was the basics of comedy, was the hang. I had avoided that for so long. And my buddy Greg Santos, who's an LA comic, I met him there. We notoriously we were at the bowling alley in Billings, Montana, and bought them out of Jello shots. I think we spent maybe $150 at this Montana bowling alley bar in noon. And he convinced me to come to LA and visit him. And it was this feeling of having a friend group out there. He let me hang out with his friends. He introduced me to them. So that was kind of step one, was Big Sky. I really think was a pivotal moment. On that first trip to LA, I just did some spots. I wasn't working out, but it was mindset more than anything. I was growing stale in New York. I was upset with the venues, the shows. It was just a frustration. And then the second trip to LA, which was probably a month and a half, 2 months after the first one, I started hiking there. And the apartment I was staying at had a gym. I hadn't worked out since I was in college. So next thing you know, I'm hiking every other day. I walk everywhere in Los Angeles because no one walks there. I'd get stoned, walk everywhere. And I'm working out, lifting again. So I came home from that. I think I lost 20, 25 pounds that month. And then that just steamrolled into getting into running when I came home. When I came back home, I started running because I knew I couldn't keep escaping LA like that. I'd blown a lot of money. I'm back home, live with my parents right now because I lost so much income when the virus came. And I figured running was it. The thing that I loved most about LA was just feeling free. I felt kind of on my own. I could do what I wanted, see who I wanted. If I wanted to be alone, I could. If I wanted to have friends, I could. And running was like, all right, running makes you feel free. And I kind of feel like how I felt when I was walking, 3 hours a day in LA or whatnot.
Sure. A change of scenery would be huge if you've been in pretty much one place for
change of scenery is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, every year I put together what I like to call punk rock comedy tours, where we do anywhere from 20 to 30 cities in 1 month. And the reason I would do that every year is because that 2 months of planning the tour, then you got the month of promoting the tour. That sucks. That's the worst. But that month when you're on that tour and it's just you and the comics you bring and you're in a car driving across the country, it's like when you're just out running for 4 hours. It's just complete freedom. You find yourself checking your phone less because you're driving everywhere. You have shows every night. It was just this feeling of freedom that fucking the road brought. And I don't even know how I got to talking on the road, but I miss it so much.
I get it. I mean, you get squirrely in the same place.
Change of scenery. That was it.
Yeah, change of scenery. Yeah, no. I asked my girlfriend this morning what month it was. Like everything's just kind of like running together, and not having, this is like an extreme of not having a change of scenery, of like being in your home every day and just kind of every day feeling the same. But I think moving cities is kind of underrated, even if it's just temporary, just to get a fresh perspective on things, just to like get a new outlook,
just to shake it up a little. I mean, it's amazing what a change of scenery could do, even if it's just change. I do that. Like if I start to get bored in one of my runs, I'll just go find a place I've never run in and go run there. I mean, the change of scenery is everything. It could really just rewire the mind quickly.
Yeah, totally. I get bored of things too quickly. So any sort of change up and everything is always needed every once in a while. And I think that's that's interesting how it played into your thought process for exercising and for improving your health and getting better that way. Like 25 pounds in 1 month is already, I mean, your whole journey is incredible, but 20 pounds in a month is ridiculous to begin with. It's almost a pound a day.
Yeah.
Like that's eye opening right there.
Well, the thing is, when you're 350 plus pounds, you're living such an unhealthy life that I really felt there was a part of me that I didn't look in the mirror and notice a difference until like those first 100 pounds were off. That they came off quick. They came off what I remember is easy. I don't remember too much struggle. And I do remember just never even paying any mind to it. Like it kind of felt like I was just losing it, but I wasn't seeing it. It was
Right.
very
Right.
weird.
Right. So do you have any, I mean, obviously running all the time and you're keeping the weight off, but do you have any other goals or things in mind with fitness?
So yeah, I mean, I like I said, I've gotten into ultra marathons. I have my first one October 10th, which is a 33-mile race, relatively flat. What I really am getting into now is this elevation stuff, climbing, whatnot. So I have another ultra marathon as long as it goes through in March, which is 40 miles and 12,000 feet of climbing, and then 12,000 feet of descent. The main goals are there's the three big races are the Leadville 100, the Western States 100, and UTMB Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, which are the three big 100-plus mile races. I would love to run at least one or two 100-mile races.
That'd be awesome. Holy crap.
Yeah, there's no comedians that I know of that have. Michelle Wolf is an ultra runner. She's done 50-mile
Oh, I didn't know
races.
that. Okay.
Yeah, she's done a few. I think she might have done the Tahoe 50, which is a big race. There's no comedians that I know of outside of her, and there's none that I know that have ever done 100. And the reason people ask me I'm insane, like, why do you want to do this? I would watch these documentaries of the best ultra runners finishing these races, and then the middle of the pack guys and the people who just get in and kind of just come in under the time limit. And all of these people, when they were crossing the finish line, were like crying tears of joy. They were all just overwhelmed with this weird bliss and happiness. And I would see that, and I was like, not only do I want to feel that, but I think that could do good for comedy. I think feeling that could really help you become in touch with something on stage.
Sure.
And I have this weird feeling that, I don't know, just the more I run, the more it's going to help. The benefits I've seen in life all around just from making these changes are unreal. Falling in love, being in a good relationship, that came because I put myself in the place to be happier. I took myself out of a negative place, made myself happier. Relationships improving. I mean, there's so many good things that have happened outside of the weight loss.
Yeah. With the running in particular, the runner's high is super underrated. I didn't understand that before I started running. And now just like, if I'm having a bad day, run 5 miles and it'll change the day in an instant. Like that's such a great feeling. I totally understand what you're saying. So 100 miles, that's gotta be a ridiculous feeling after.
Yeah, people say their biggest worry about that is that you might shit your pants. It's very common, but like I've shit my pants many times as an adult, so I got that locked and loaded. I'm ready. Being 350 pounds, you don't get that fat not shitting your pants. Come on now. There's a few along the way when you're that big.
Right. Yeah, your experience with that. That's no big deal.
No
No,
big deal.
but yeah, finishing a half marathon, finishing a 10 miler, like the high is ridiculous. And that's a place where, yeah, like creativity can come from that. Some kind of perspective can come from that.
My runner's high is so unique because I, quite publicly and always post about run stoned. I mean, I start every run quite high. So like tapping into the runner's high is very interesting because I start with the runner's high. I mean, I'm already high. And then I have to come down from that. And that come down can be pretty brutal. Of like today, I happened to feel less stoned about 8 miles in, and I just felt dead. I mean, I was like, okay, the high's completely gone, and my runner high isn't here yet. So there's nothing. But then there's some days where you come off that weed high, and then the runner's high is right there, and you're like, all right, nice, back to back, I got this.
How is it running high? Do you, I mean, obviously
I
you
love
prefer
it. I mean, I prefer it. I don't know if there's any actual benefits. I mean, it's kept me moving the whole time, and who knows? I've only been running seriously. I took my training serious at the start of the pandemic, and I'm up to 60-mile weeks. But I smoke joints. That I probably shouldn't do because it's bad for your lungs. And dry mouth is pretty intense. But I'm always pretty well hydrated and have water packs and handheld bottles. Because you pretty much start your run with a dry mouth, which is a real detriment for some people. But I've gotten so used to that it doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, the dry mouth would worry me. That's when I've seen you tweet about it. That would kind
Jolly
of freak me out.
Ranchers. I keep
Okay.
I mean, if it gets too bad, I usually have a big bag of Jolly Ranchers, and I'll just put a few on the run with me. You can't get dry mouth with a Jolly Rancher out there.
I could be wrong, but you might be the only person I know of who has the strategy of getting high first and then running with Jolly Ranchers to make sure you don't get drunk.
Dude, I do all types of weird shit out there. Today I had, I get up at 6 a.m. I start my runs because I run about an hour from my house. So that's where the best trail is. I stop. It's regular for me to go to the gas station and get 2 Gatorades and 2, or 1 pack of sweet tarts. And then I'll eat the sweet tarts when I run. I'll keep it in my little aid bag. I'll come back to the car, pop a few sweet tarts, head out for another 6 miles. Like that's the funny thing is like, especially in the longer distances, everyone has their own plan. Courtney Dauwalter, she's the biggest female ultra runner right now. She's the biggest, probably most famous ultra runner right now. She eats candy while she's out there. She eats mashed potatoes and quesadillas while she's out there. Like, health is so up to you on these long runs because there's no science behind it yet.
Sure. No, totally. Yeah. I guess so. I didn't understand there's no science behind it, but I didn't understand the strategy behind finishing a race and then they give you a beer after until I started finishing longer races. And it's like you can replenish carbs that way. First of all, it's rewarding to down a beer after you run 10, 13 miles. But secondly, like, you lost a bunch of carbs, like you can replenish right away. So now, like, I'll reward myself with a beer after like a really long run. And like, that almost sounds counterintuitive to say, I just did something super healthy. So now I'm going to chug a PBR when I get back. But like, there's no science behind it. Like, we don't know. It makes me feel good after.
Exactly.
Whatever.
And the feeling bad thing, it's like, I don't understand why we do. Like, there are times where I'll run and then I'll eat a pizza that night. But for me, those two aren't connected. I'm not eating the pizza because I ran so long. I just happen to be able to eat this pizza because I ran this morning.
Yeah.
Like, I try to separate the two. Like, I always joke that it must be insane for the dude who works at the gas station next to my house because he's known me the whole weight loss. He's only ever seen me come into his store and buy incredible amounts of candy while losing 170 pounds. He must have no idea. He must think I'm dying. He has to think I'm dying. He's like, what is this kid doing? He buys Skittles, Starburst, and Sweet Tarts, and he looks incredible.
Right. No, it's also stressful to think about it. Like, I need to get out of this habit of, okay, I lifted today. I can't have any alcohol. Like, I got to be good. Like, I ran today. I want to make sure I don't waste that workout. Like, that stuff, that way of thinking is kind of stressful. It prevents you from just enjoying things.
And I think that's why I'm really so interested in the long miles because, if I head out, I'm usually running for at the least the tiniest recovery run I'll do is 6 miles, but even my recoveries lately have been more 8 to 10. So like after that, when I get home, like regardless of what I eat, whether it be shit or something healthy, I feel my body using it. Like none of it feels wasted. Like every meal that I'm putting in my body now, it feels like it needs to be there just because, especially in the New Jersey heat. I mean, there are some days I'm running, it's 100 degrees out. I did 20 miles, I think 2 weeks ago, and I lost 11 pounds on that run.
Holy shit.
Because I always weigh myself before and after to make sure I replenish enough liquids to put on the weight that I was of that morning. Right. And that day, because I have gotten heat stroke a few times or whatever you call it, heat exhaustion.
Yeah. That's wild. So that's crazy. Do you think, I mean, obviously you're determined, but once the world becomes back to normal or somewhat normal and you can start touring again with more regularity and doing normal shows with more regularity, do you have a plan of like how you're going to balance these two things of keeping up the running and still not going to?
So yeah, I was worrying about that a lot because I was like, so much of working out is because of the time you have, and I have so much time right now. But that's why weekday runs, if I run Monday through Friday, which I do, weekend runs change up. It's a 6 a.m. alarm now. There's no way around it. At least at the latest 6 a.m. alarm. And I don't need that. There are a lot of days where the only thing I have to do is that run. But it's
Hmm.
just me preparing for life whenever things get back to normal, because
Sure.
I'll be used to that alarm again. If
Yeah.
I could get myself up during a pandemic when I don't need to be, then I know I'll be ready for it then. And that's kind of what I'm doing, just getting the discipline ready ahead of time, because I know it will be hard. But that's the beautiful thing about it now, is I know to prepare for it.
Right. The routine is everything, because once you get into that routine, once you're comfortable in it, you're not going to break out of it.
Yeah, I thrive on discipline. There's some, my therapists will say this, and there are other people who will say this, but I fall on the spectrum. They say I have what is formerly known as Asperger's, autism spectrum disorder, and that ties into that a lot.
Sure. Yeah. I had a joke once about how somewhere we're all on the spectrum if the spectrum's big enough, right? Like,
I agree. I think everyone does have
I
some
agree.
some parts of themselves on the spectrum. I never really paid any mind to it. I was diagnosed bipolar when I was really young. I didn't believe it. I was in a mental hospital. They forced pills onto me. It was this whole thing. I eventually weaned myself off of it because it wasn't something I felt I needed. And then over the years, I noticed these things about my life, how I saw things that other people didn't, picked up on some things I felt that just didn't make sense, that I couldn't communicate to others. And funny enough, comic whose brother has Asperger's pulled me aside one day and described it to me. And she was like, I think this is something you have. She's like,
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of these things in you. And that's when I started researching it. And I found these forums where people who were diagnosed with autism as adults wrote like essays and how they felt about some things. And it was the first time I had heard people kind of talk to the feelings I had. And
Hmm.
that's when I was like, oh, I guess this is something. So that's why I actually started going back to therapy during the pandemic, to kind of just get confirmation of that and work on, kind of the negative side, and how being undiagnosed into my 20s has affected me, and kind of correct some of those behaviors now.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't even, it was a couple of years ago, I realized how common it was and how it manifests itself in different ways, and how a lot of people probably are somewhere on the spectrum. Like Jerry Seinfeld said in an interview a couple of years ago, he undiagnosed, but thinks he could be. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, like a lot, it just manifests itself in different ways in someone's personality and behavior. It's way
Oh
more
yeah, I
common than you
personally
think.
think my father has it and it was passed down from him. He refuses to acknowledge that, but there's a lot of things that I get from him that are, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, that come from him. But I personally love it. I mean, if that is what I have, and I do agree with the diagnosis on this one, it it in it gives me a power, kind of what feels like a superpower, in concentration. I mean, it's why
Sure.
I could go from just being a 350-pound guy to wanting to compete in ultra races, or
Yeah.
going from a college athlete to a stand up to the cellar so quickly, because when you put something in your head, you're like, this is what I'm going to do. That mind says, all right, we're doing it. Roger that. Let's go.
Yeah. I think it does encourage creativity and some determination for sure.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I was an only child too. So those two go hand in hand. It's quite odd that what people would describe as only child syndrome line up to a lot of what people would call autism spectrum disorder. It's like
Right.
these multiple spectrums really overlap, because you're alone all the time and have to find ways to be creative. Some of those tendencies you could develop there, some therapists would say, are Asperger's. So it's like it's just trying to find where you stand, and finding where those who make you feel a little more comfortable, and be like, all right, I like what you have. It makes sense to me. You talk how I talk. You you see things how I see things. I'm gonna run with this one right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to learn these things about yourself in a way too, because it's just like, what is the future going to hold once I have a better understanding of myself and how I operate and why I do things? I think about that all the time. Like, the more I learn about myself continuously is exciting for what I can do in the future. Like, you're always learning. And that's just kind of like a
Always learning,
good
always
outlook.
improving, and that is part of my workouts, my running. I mean, I have uh, anxiety that I didn't know existed when I was heavier. I just, when I guess when you're heavy, you can focus on so many things about being heavy that once you're not heavy anymore, you have all this extra time to think about other shit. And a lot of it is my own problems that I have to work through. When I'm out there running, I'll just bring that up. I'm out there for 2 hours, I'll turn off the headphones for an hour. And if no one's around me, I'll talk my problems out loud. I'll think in
Mhm.
my head where my issues are, what my anxieties are, and I'll just try to work through it.
Yeah, I love that outlook. Just always looking to learn more about yourself and then improve upon it. The last thing that I wanted to get into with you was, and we kind of hinted at this about when things are more normal. You've been doing shows in parking lots and parks and stuff. What do you think stand-up's going to look like, say, a year from now? Assuming things are going to get somewhat back to normal, do you think there are going to be permanent changes?
I don't know. It's kind of like one of those things that in the beginning of the pandemic, I thought about a lot, like what's stand up going to look like. And then there's just so many possible doom and gloom scenarios of if venues don't get open soon that they could close because comedy is this weird thing where like comedians don't get paid that much. And then simultaneously, comedy clubs don't have that much money. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, so many of them are in dire, shape right now. Uh, I don't know. I personally, I feel like comedy has always been adaptation. I mean, you look at stand-up styles of the 70s, it kind of, not everyone's like this, but the majority of those 70s comedians sound like the times they were in. We kind of adjust to the world around us, and I think comics are better at that than most people. So I feel like regardless of what happens, we're just going to keep finding ways. Warmer places will do better because they can do outdoor shows all the time. That's the
Right.
beautiful thing about the
That's true.
outdoors is in New York, these park shows, they're not fucking organized by anyone.
Yeah.
These are people saying, come see these people in this park at this time, and people are showing up. It's not being run by the city or anything. Cuomo still says comedy's illegal here. Uh, I think it'll look different. I think the thing I think you'll see differently is you're going to see a lot more big names sharing lineups, I think.
Mm.
I don't know if that's going to be the truth, but I think you had a lot of people who were just starting to really become nationally known headliners who might drop down to co-headlining with people. I think you're going to have some new headliners like myself who are going to have to take feature work. I think there will be hierarchy changes just because there's going to be, I think there'll be less time to go around, but there's also going to be smaller audiences. When a club's at half capacity, they need
Yeah.
to make sure they have someone in there who's at least going to fill it to half capacity every show.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, there's the financial side of it where clubs are going to have to maneuver to make sure they can stay open. And I think there's on the comedian side, there's the creative aspect of it where the longer opportunities are kind of shut down, how do they adapt? Like, do you take to leaning into a podcast or leaning into creating, like Tim Dillon's putting out these short videos? He was doing it
Yeah.
before the pandemic, but now it's like, this is the one thing you can do consistently is like really lean into creating shorts, like comedy shorts you can put on Instagram and YouTube and stuff.
I
Is it
think that's
that,
it
like,
because we can't work towards the late night set anymore. I mean, so much
yeah,
of us were, can I come by, run my 5 tonight? I was working on a set for the late show with James Corden. We had 4 minutes approved. I was close to getting my first one done. That's not even a thought in my head anymore because
sure.
the way I see it now is you grow your audience and you keep putting out content. You pick up the new fans you can, like Tim does. You got to get in. I'm starting. I don't. My podcast, unfortunately, was a victim of the coronavirus because we used to do it inside a deli, and it just wasn't sanitary for the deli to have people in there with their mouths open talking. So I'm in the process of starting a new one that'll be up in hopefully next month.
Nice.
And it's like you just gotta keep putting shit out because like that's not gonna matter anymore. The late night sets aren't gonna matter because who knows when you're gonna have people in the stands of the Tonight Show to even listen to the set.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's like the evolving gatekeeper thing is like, now you're not thinking about the Tonight Show as much. In the 90s, that's a huge deal, but also like the gatekeepers change for specials all the time too, from HBO to Comedy Central to Netflix. I think that will eventually change. That speaks to the evolving medium and how comedy kind of adapts to different times. Like we talked about Norman before we were recording. Like he just put out a special on YouTube by himself. Hannibal Buress just self-produced a special. Like
Yeah, Sam
that.
Morril, Hannibal,
Sam
Joe
Morril, yeah,
List,
Joe List,
Norman, the
great one.
YouTube special.
Yeah, like that could be the next thing of,
Schultz
when you're
kind
already,
of started that.
yeah, Schultz puts out so much because it's free to create your own content and just throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. Like
Even
think
myself, I'm quite lazy with it. I wish I put out more content like those guys. I mean, it's like
Right.
they're always putting shit out. It's incredible.
Yeah, and once you get into that mindset of like I can put out content for free or I can self-produce a special, it might change the rest of the industry where you're not waiting on Netflix's approval or Amazon Prime's approval, whatever. Like that's how the industry kind of shifts, is that mindset shifting first.
Yeah, and I think what the pandemic did for comics is it hopefully put into perspective what they actually want from this. And
Yeah.
for me, it was realizing what do I miss most, and I missed connection with crowds. I missed live shows. I missed being in a club, sitting on a stool, and zoning in on a table for crowd work. I missed having that whole room laugh at something that was just created in the moment. And I was like, that is my goal. My goal is now oriented around that. What could I do whenever comedy comes back to put myself in larger rooms and on the road again? That to me, it's not about the late night set. It's just about connecting with people now. And that's going to be my goal moving forward, is what can I do to move the needle on that, which is asses in the seats, so that's why the podcast comes up. It's like, it's this annoying thing where you have to play the business game of it, because that's how you ultimately get the asses in the seats for the jokes. You don't want to be the businessman, but the businessman makes you the comic now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the biggest positive of the pandemic is it has caused people in any walk of life to reevaluate their goals a little bit, think about what they want. Just because being in the same room all the time, going through the same routine every day just makes you uncomfortable. And once you become uncomfortable, it can kind of breed creativity or breed thoughts of, what am I actually doing? Like, what are my short-term goals? What are my long-term goals? Because at the beginning of the pandemic, it was kind of a joke of we're going to eat unhealthy, we're going to drink every day, like all this kind of stuff. But really, I think more people did was the opposite thing. It was like, I'm going to work out more. I'm going to reevaluate what I want out of my career, what I want out of my
A lot of
relationship.
breakups. A lot of people were like, did not make it because they're like, I don't need you.
Right.
when they needed to buckle down, they're like, you're not my person. You're the worst.
Right. It just gave everybody time to think, which I think is cool.
It did. It's funny because I remember the first few weeks of the pandemic, I gained 20 pounds. I gained a lot of weight. I wasn't running. I had stopped running. I had just started dating my girl. We were dating for 3 weeks before the pandemic came. We were in the honeymoon phase, doing what we wanted. I was like, I don't need a workout. And then I gained some weight. And I was like, all back in. I was like, I'm not letting this happen again. So enough people tweet at me, you're going to get fat again. I'm like, fuck that.
Well, we thought it was going to be like 2 weeks at first too. So it's like, I can take a break.
I thought I was
2
only
weeks.
going to have to run really hard for like a month. And now next thing you know, I'm like, all right, guys, you want to end this? I'm still running here. Can I stop?
Right. No, but you have the right mindset. Not just for the pandemic, but everything you've done in the past year. So it's inspiring to hear your story and for other people to hear your story, but also just your outlook and how you accomplish that and your outlook toward everything else. So
thanks, man.
Appreciate you sharing it. Where can people find more of your work, find you online, website, Twitter, Instagram, anything like that?
Just Twitter and Instagram at Dan LaMorte. That's kind of what I update the most. My website is fucking useless at this point. But outside of that, I mean, that's where I post show dates. I'll have the podcast going soon. It's going to be called On the Way with Dan LaMorte. Who knows when that'll be up. But outside of that, thanks for having me, man. It's fun to talk. I always joke that I speak so much in rambling because it's like whether being stoned or from car accidents. But the only thing I like to just, as long as my point gets across that I'm just always trying to strive towards doing something, changing a bit, growing. Because I think that helps on stage and in life.